In chapter 2, yes. Okay, so before we start, we have to set up the data. Okay, so we need to run this code chunk where you'll read the West Roxbury file into housing.df. So make sure that you scroll over to this part in your file and then run it. Put 3 steps down, right? And then I need to do 40 to 70, 40 to 70 notes. Okay, make sure that your folder path is correctly set. So now I have my housing.df. Okay, there is one more thing we need to do before we start today's lesson. So once you have the housing.df, we are going to set one more variable to factor. So we already have the last column remodel as factor. Okay, so we're going to now set fireplace into factor. So we will have 2 factor columns. Okay, so scroll down to housing.df $fireplace, okay, as factor. So run that as well. Okay, so if you do a str is structure. Okay, so it will show you the structure of our data. So we have all of these variables. Okay, so num is decimal number, int is integer, and then we have 2 factors, okay, fireplace and remodel. Okay, so everybody got this far? Okay, read the data file .csv file, and then you convert the fireplace into a factor. So those two, we already did those 2 things in previous classes. So all you have to do is to scroll to that particular code chunk and run that. Okay, so now we talked about dummy variables or binary variables last time. So one more time, we need dummy variables for categorical variables. Okay. There are some methodologies that can take dummy, categorical variables as is. We don't have to do any modification. But there are methods, there are procedures that depend upon numerical, or I should say model-based procedures, okay, like regression analysis or neural networks. Okay, they require only numerical variables. So if you have a categorical variable which is not a numerical variable, okay, so here the remodel is obviously a non-numeric variable because they have non-numeric values. Okay, but fireplace is also non-numeric, even though it is coded with numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, but these 0, 1, 2, 3s are coded as characters. Okay, it talks about how many fireplace. So this is an ordinal variable, but they are still categorical variables. They are character variables. They are not numbers. So when a modeling procedure requires numerical variables, then we have to convert these into numerical values. And there are, if it is an ordinal variable like this one, where there is an ordering, so one possible approach is to simply convert these 0, 1, 2, 3 into value 0, 1, 2, 3, and then we are done, right? But that's not a good idea, especially when you're using procedures like regression analysis. So a better approach is to define a dummy variable for each possible value. Okay? So you'll have a dummy variable for 0, a dummy variable for 1, a dummy variable for 2, and so on. So a given categorical variable then gets recoded into a bunch of dummy variables. And the number of dummy variables you need, okay, so you can define one for each possible value, right? If you have 5 different possible values, you can define one dummy variable for each possible value. But you don't need all 5 because the last one is redundant, because the last column can be determined based on the values of the first 4 in case they have 5 possible values for the categorical variable. So in general, if you have k possible values for a categorical variable, all you need is k minus 1 dummy variables to fully define it. Okay? So that's what we are trying to do here, and there are some packages in R that will automatically do this when you run a procedure, but there are other procedures that you have to set up the dummy variables. Okay? And that's where our model matrix code is helpful. Okay? Model matrix code will achieve that. Okay, what that does is that you specify a model, okay, and then it will set up a matrix for that model, a matrix of values. So model matrix, you can specify that I want a model like target y equal to x sub 1 squared and x plus x sub 2 log of x sub 2 and so on. So you can set up a model and you specify the model matrix will take the original data and then convert it to suit, to fit the model that you define. So that's why it's called model matrix. And we can use the, and if you have a factor variable, a character variable, okay, you will convert that factor variable into dummy variables. That's part of the procedure model matrix. So we can use that code, okay, but we are not going to do any variable transformation. All we are interested in is dummy variables, right? So what we can do is we can specify a very simple model, which is simply the list of values. I mean list of variables, sorry. So okay, the code here would be model matrix, right? And then you specify a model. Okay. Normally, if you have a target and then a model, so you will specify the target. So in this case, it will be like total value. So you will specify the target. Okay, so this is so model is specified in this way. Okay, so you'll have the target and then a tilde, and then variables and transformations. Okay. Whatever transformations you want, you can specify that. Okay. And each variable in the transformation should be followed by a plus, right? We don't have any target here because all we want is to convert the factor variables into dummy variables. So there is nothing to the left of tilde. Okay? Now, you may specify an intercept or you may not specify an intercept. So think of regression analysis. Regression analysis, you have y equal to b sub 0, which is the intercept, right, plus b sub 1, x sub 1, b sub 2, x sub 2, and so on. So you can suppress the intercept, if you don't want intercept, then you say 0. Okay. And then plus, then you specify all the variables that you want. Okay. If you want all the variables to be considered, then you have to just say period. Okay. All right. And then you have to specify what the original data is. So we want the data, the original data, to come from housing.df. Of course, if I run this, it will create the model matrix, but it will not be saved anywhere. So it will be gone. So what we need to do is to put it somewhere. Okay. You can do it in 2 steps or one step. Okay. I'm going to do this. Housing, right, dot mat. Okay. So matrix. So if I run that, then so here is the matrix. Okay, so if I click that, it will open the housing.mat, and you see that all the original variables are as is, and then at the end you have dummy variables. Okay. There are 5 dummy variables for the 5 different values of fireplace. And then you have only 2 dummy variables, even though you have 3 possible values for remodel.